So, guys, welcome to the latest episode of All Things Football. And today, myself, Sahil, and Wasim are joined by a world-class, world-renowned broadcaster. He lent his voice to Konami's Pro Evolution Soccer and is one half of the dynamic duo that's so synonymous with being the voices of the Premier League when on commentary. Now, with his partner in crime, Peter Drury, the storytelling from the gantries is the perfect complement to the poetry we as fans witness on the pitch. He was signed by Liverpool as a 20-year-old in what was legendary manager Bob Paisley's final signing, went on to win league titles as well as FA Cup and European Cups, but had his career curtailed due to injury at the young age of 27. Many know the voice. I'm not too sure many know the face, but we're here to put the face to the voice, and we'd like to welcome Mr. Jim Beglin. Jim, it's a great pleasure having you on the show. Welcome to All Things Football.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here and looking forward to having a good chat with you guys.
Thanks.
Absolutely. We're definitely stoked and excited, and right off the bat, Jim, to get kicked off. Of course, in January 87, just a few months after many of us were born, you suffered a leg break after neighbours, against neighbours, Everton in the League Cup. And I have to say, when we approached you for this particular interview, we took a find, a bit of that footage. I managed to find it on YouTube. And one always cringes when seeing those sort of things. And we never really want to see any players suffer such an injury, no matter who they play for. Now, of course, Bob Paisley, he called it one of the worst leg breaks he had ever seen. And the famous Alan Hansen said that the tackle was a mile high and an hour late. You then suffered a knee injury, bringing an end to your time at Liverpool. And then, of course, after that, you moved to Leeds, suffered a recurrence of the knee injury, which forced you to retire at 27. Just on that, Jim, as football fans, we often don't know how debilitating an injury can be to a player. So from a mental aspect, how tough were those periods for you, if you can think that far back? And how did you overcome the initial injuries? And what were your emotions like when it dawned on you that you had to retire at such a young age, when many people don't even reach their prime?
Yeah, I like to think I'm a glass half full person. In fact, I am. I try to see the positives in everything. But when something in life, especially professional life, hits you like that, I wasn't ready for some of the dark periods I experienced thereafter, because it was a constant duel in how can this happen to me, and that kind of positive voice trying to come through at the same time saying you'll be okay. I always based my progression in my career, whether it be football or broadcasting, on determination. Some people thrive on confidence. Some people have different ways of getting through things. I've always been very determined, and yeah, that was a really tough time, because everything in my life, from when I was a kid, from when I was just kicking the ball about on the street at home in Waterford in Ireland, everything was geared towards that. Of course, I didn't have a picture of seeing myself as a professional when I was that young. But as I began to get to 10 to 12 to 14, and I really began to improve and find my best position on a football field, I realized that there was a strong opportunity, potentially, that I could make a career in the game. And of course, once I did really get going, in that Liverpool side, we'd won the double a year before. I had a long run in the side. I was flying. I was fit. I was strong. I'd ironed out a lot of the mistakes I'd made, and then bang, it hit me. And yeah, that was a very, very tough period, because I went through every emotion that you can go through. And I always sympathize when I see guys suffer serious injury on a football pitch, because I even though it won't necessarily be the same as what I experienced, but I know that they're going to have to go through a very long process, physically and mentally, and that's never easy because you're not prepared for it. You don't really know what's coming. You don't know what's going to hit you. So you can wake up one morning feeling pretty good, and then you can wake up the next day feeling dreadful and feeling as if the world has just caved in on you. I had all of that, but the age that I was playing in then was very different. The mindset, the culture, and it was about kind of being a man, not showing weakness, toughen up, and that was the way it was. I think handed down from Bill Shankly at Anfield back then. There was a kind of a toughness to everything. Under Bill Shankly, I've heard all the stories that if you were injured, you were no good to him. So you were outcast. He didn't want to know, honestly. That's the way those players were treated when they were injured, And so I became part of all of that. And I listened to Ronnie Moran and Roy Evans, no sympathy. There was no sympathy for me, really. Although I think those guys knew that it would be very hard to resurrect my career because my leg break was particularly bad. But I refused to accept that my career was over. So I battled on. I probably should have quit, but I battled on for another 2-3 seasons, moved on to Leeds. And ultimately, because of the spin-off of other injuries, weight-bearing injuries, as you often get, I had to pack it in. Yeah, and initially, I had no idea where I was going to go. I had no plan of attack, and everything was up in the air for a while.
Just on that as well, Jim, you mentioned the culture being so different back then, where players were told to toughen up and not show any pain. Based on what you've just said, what was the support like from people close to you, your family, and the club itself and your teammates when you had that particular injury?
Well, the club were good because the club did everything at the time they could, which included flying my family over while I was still in hospital. So yeah, all of that was very good. But it's not like nowadays when you have huge medical departments and you have sports psychologists and people to speak to. I had none of that. I had no outlet for that. And the only outlet I had really were a couple of guys I shared a house with, John McGregor, a Scottish guy, and Ken DeMonge, who's another Irish guy. I was sharing a house with them at the time. And I would kind of, let things go really verbally to them. And of course, my family. My family were a huge support. My family were everything at the time. If the truth be told, I felt lost. I'm not looking for any sympathy now, but I'm reflecting back. I felt lost and very much alone as I tried to recover. And I think an awful lot of people within Liverpool Football Club at the time probably felt with the seriousness of my injury that there's no way he's coming back from that. But I think my determination got me back. But regrettably, I went on to play in pain, especially at Leeds United, because I broke my left leg. And then on the comeback trail, funnily enough, playing against Manchester United in the reserves at Anfield, they played me in midfield trying to get me fit. And I remember just turning to help one on up the pitch and maybe set one of the strikers away. And as I turned to flick the ball onwards, my right knee, the cartilage tore in my right knee. And it's unfortunately the next morning they had to take most of my lateral cartilage out. It's incredible. They can replace hearts, lungs, kidneys, livers, you name it. But a little bit of grizzle in your knee, and nothing could be done about that. And ultimately, that's what began to cause me my problems, because my leg actually healed wonderfully well. The surgeon did an immense job on my broken leg and putting it all together again like a jigsaw. But that knee problem was what haunted me thereafter. And yeah, I remember, in Leeds, in the build up to a game, I could only do straight stuff because any twisting and turning would set my knee into, it would swell. And then after a game, I for 2 days I was kind of walking around a bit like John Wayne because I was in pain. I was struggling, and that wasn't enjoyable. And I knew I was on the slow slope to retirement, and I hated the thought of that. I didn't want to give into it, and that's the one thing now. And I always say to kind of aspiring professionals that, you have got to be able to look in the mirror in time and know that you gave it everything. And thankfully I can do that. I can do that with myself, that I can look in the mirror and think, well, I gave the lot. I couldn't have offered any more to my attempt at rehabilitation and full recovery. I gave it everything I had, and it wasn't to be. But listen, I've been very fortunate, even though it wasn't targeted. Very fortunate that I got a chance to move into the world of the media.
Jim, you've played for Leeds, and you mentioned about your journey at Liverpool and Leeds, so two historically big clubs. Tell us what it was like back then, and how happy you are to see them back in the Premier League doing well under Bielsa.
Yeah. Leeds then, I remember Ronnie Moran, who was the coach at Liverpool, a legendary coach at Liverpool. And the first club to come in for me was Ipswich Town. Mm-hmm. And Ronnie pulled me to one side and he said, listen, son, might not be such a bad move, because there's life other than football down there in East Anglia. And now I get what he was trying to say, but he thought it might be easier on me. But football is football, and you have to give everything you've got. And I didn't really see that, what he. I knew what he was trying to say, but I didn't think it was the right thing he was saying, because you have to give everything you've got all the time. That's the way it is, week in, week out. Nothing less will do. So I think he was trying to tell me that football is religion in Liverpool. Yeah. Down there, it's not taken as seriously, and so you might be able to kind of cope with the environment better. But listen, I went and signed with Leeds, and it couldn't have been more different, really, because I knew I was going to another huge club, and at the time they were in the second division under Howard Wilkinson, and I knew they were very serious about getting back to the top flight, and so. That was for me. I thought, okay, it's a bigger challenge, and I have more to prove, but I'm gonna take it on. And geographically, it was kinder as well to, where our family home was. It's only 70, 80 miles from where I lived. So yeah, it all appealed. But on day 2, I think, of pre-season, I picked up yet another injury, which. I was told subsequently, Howard Wilkinson loved to get you running, guys. Believe me, he used to hammer us for running. And I went on honeymoon that summer before I went back to Leeds, and I was given a program to get fit. I was given a program to follow. But it was so hot in Mexico. I went to Acapulco. It was so hot there. I was getting up at like 3, 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning so I could do my running. So by the time I arrived back, I was nowhere near of the standard that he wanted. So he put us through grueling sessions. And then late on the second day, I can remember feeling something in my left knee. This isn't my bad knee now. My bad knee was the right knee, but the left knee. And, that ended up just dragging on for ages, and it caused me more problems. And to be honest with you, I just ran into problem after problem at Leeds. But during my time in the side, I absolutely loved it. I mean, I was treated with great warmth. The people were very good to me, and they were willing me to recover and do well. But unfortunately, I was mostly always the injured one. And I hated that. I despised that because I felt inferior. And I felt that level that I'd hit at Liverpool, and that level of competition, I was never going to be able to meet again. And And sure enough, in the end, I had to give in to the pain, and I had to retire and stop it.
Jim, we're going to move away from the negative part of your career to the most positive part of your career. Being involved with Pro Evolution Soccer. So as you know, I'm a huge fan of the game. And in fact, we've started a small community here in South Africa, and it's growing throughout Africa. We've started something called PES Society. So you've got a huge following here already, believe it or not. For example, you've been commentating on this game, doing analysis on the game, first, I think, with John Champion and now with Peter Drury. Like I say, you've become a real household name, not just because of your exploits in the real world, but also, in fact, in a video game. Could you tell us maybe what the experience was like calling a football match in a video game instead of in reality? And without giving too much away, can we expect to hear from you in future releases, perhaps?
Well, I'd like to think, yes, it will continue, certainly for the near future, but we'll have to wait and see thereafter. But when I was first asked, I mean, it was, I think, John Champion who was the commentator.
Yes.
I think he put me forward. I think he mentioned my name. In with a few others, I think they decided to go for me in the end. And I had no idea of what was really involved in it all. So I went in on that first day, and I remember we kind of got the feel with things. And then it was a case of I had to look at a script and I had to deliver lines. Now, okay. I quickly realized that the script wasn't really suited to my style, my way of saying things. And I had a whole room full of people, a recording room. I could see through the glass window, all expecting, to hear this and that. And, this game's going to be great because now we got Jim Beglin in. And it wasn't like that at all. I found the process quite difficult initially because they were expecting me to look at a line quickly and then be able to change that line as I look through it. And that's not an easy thing to do. And some of the lines were actually quite long. And I can remember querying that at the time because the game obviously is short. It's not 90 minutes. And I remember thinking, well, surely I don't need my sentences to be as long as they are. I can shorten the sentence. I can edit the sentence and still get the message across. It doesn't need to be that long because I've heard it on the game. Eventually I heard it on the game and I thought, this could do with kind of a few less words. So bit by bit, a gradual process. The first couple of years were I found them extremely tough because I wasn't necessarily delivering what they wanted. But then I realized that the only way of solving my problem, or as I saw it, was for me to rewrite the script and basically put my style on it. And once I began to do that and I began to deliver the lines, the recording became far easier. But there are, as you guys know, there are millions of different trigger conditions in the game. And I can remember parts of the initial script, and it was kind of, I'm happy to admit it. I love doing the game, and I love it when people say, well, come online and throw something they've heard from the game at me. It's all good. But there are also people that will come on when I've sent something dumb, according to them, in the last minute when they've conceded a goal and lost the game, and they'll come on and have a go at me.
But it's not your fault.
I also get that, yeah. But no, I realized, that I could deliver the lines much more fluidly and just get everything rolling. And I had a confidence as well in the fact that, I'm now looking at a line that I've written. I know what's coming. So, and, I could add or subtract, a little off the line, depending on how I felt in the moment. And so, it all began to come a little easier. I mean, it's at times when you are stuck in a trigger condition that isn't the most excitable, it can become mind-numbing. It can become become tedious. It's hard because you're going line after line after line, and you're kind of desperate to get through it. So it can be tough in recording that at times, but ultimately it's all much softer for me nowadays, and we seem to get through it with little problems, thankfully.
Awesome.
Well, Jim, just to move away from the gaming aspect of your career and to move back to the actual football field and matters regarding the football field, of course, I'm sure we can all agree that the game has changed quite a bit from the time you were playing to the modern game that we're experiencing today. Now, we've seen multiple changes to the offside rule. There certainly wasn't as much gamesmanship back then as it is now. And I remember yourself and I, discussing something on Twitter where players, they go down a lot easier. Myself and Sahil always tell Wasim, who's a massive fan of Deco, that these guys went to Deco's diving school because that's where it originated from. And of course, also, we've seen the advent of infamous VAR. Now, I think speaking for Sahil and Wasim, we all believe that VAR is needed in the game. What we do call into question, though, is the implementation of VAR and of the system. What are your thoughts on the changes you've witnessed over the past few decades, and particularly VAR? Do you think it's here to stay? And what are your views on just the implementation part and players being called offside for such marginal decisions? And to highlight one particular incident, the Jordan Henderson winner against Everton at Goodison, that was called offside because apparently Sadio Mane was offside, which I don't, even as a United fan, I didn't believe that. So just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I remember saying when VAR was first introduced, I remember saying that it will upset and please fans, all across the Premier League, that nobody is free of it, and I think that's the way it's been. I think everybody's split down the middle on it. It was introduced to get the big decisions right, the important moments right in games, but I think it was taken too far. For example, on the offsides, I think if it's that close, I think they should just wave it clear. I think if it ever becomes that close, I think that they need to say, well, if it's down to millimeters, then leave it. Just let it carry on. Because prior to that, the advantage was always supposed to be given to the attacking player. And yet all of a sudden now that was just, immediately removed. I like to think as well on the handball issue that I remember people at the time saying, well, you either give them all or you don't give any. And I just remember disagreeing with that. I think that's wrong because they're all so different that each one should be judged on its merits. But I honestly, and I've experienced it myself. The modern ball is kind of quicker. It's lighter. It bends more. But I can remember at times trying to get out of the way, feeling that, it's going to hit me on the arm. When something came flying my way. And it's almost as if they're kind of saying defenders are thick because, they want to make, of course they don't want to make a handball. The vast majority of handballs in penalty boxes are accidental, are totally accidental. The vast majority, and yet I remember at the time before VAR even came in, pundits were saying, that's a penalty, that's a penalty, that's a penalty. Every attacking pundit on television seemed to be saying that's a penalty. And as a former defender, I'm going, no, it's not. It might look it, but it isn't.
Yeah.
So, but I'm pleased because I think, common sense has prevailed to a certain extent in terms of the judgment now of whether, what they've got in place, the arm is away from the body, etc. I think it's a little more sensible now the way they're examining it. And I think they're getting the right decisions more often than not, but it's still far from perfect. And I think it probably will be, because there are always going to be subjective moments. Like you referred to it earlier, Riaz. And I always say it, minimum contact. These days, maximum exaggeration. That's the way it is nowadays. I look, they're all at it. And they're all at it because they know that VAR will check it. So even if it's not flagged up at the time, or the referee's whistle isn't blown, then it will probably be looked at as soon as the play is stopped, and it can be taken back. And these guys know that. So I refer to it now as it's a diver's paradise. I think I played at a time. We had divers when I played, of course. Of course there were divers. Yeah. Particularly, when you played in European Cup matches, as it was then, Champions League, of course, now. I mean, I remember playing against the Greek captain, against Panathinaikos, and he couldn't wait to hit the deck. Every time I even touched him. And sometimes, you're not even aware of what you're doing with your arms. You're not even aware that you're just trying to keep him there, or, it's just all subconscious. And he'd go down, and he kept on falling over. And I just remember looking at him. And I think we had an Italian referee that night, and he just basically kept on telling him to get up because he knew what he was playing at. But I also can remember when I first got in the Liverpool team that if we were in a good position, there was, say, 5 or 10 minutes left, I can remember all the shouts if I was going to close somebody down. Don't touch him. Don't touch him. Because basically, if you make any contact whatsoever, even if it is minimal, then you know what they're going to do. They're going to try and gain an advantage. And they might be able to flick a free kick into the box and, get something out of the game. So it's always been there. But I just think it's a shame that the authorities, and by that I mean FIFA, because it's a world game, and if they alter anything, it has to be worldwide. I would think that FIFA have to put some sort of a deterrent in place. And, all these little kind of a player, when he gets between opponent and ball and he feels the slightest bump, they fall down nowadays. For me, that should be just ignored, and there should be an encouragement to make them stay on their feet more. And the other thing that I dislike about it, and it's quite simple, I played at a time, and even if I'd caught somebody, genuinely the guy would get up and say to the referee, don't book him, ref.
Yes.
And it was sincere. It was sincere. Now they know that they have to be careful because they can't make that gesture about, yellow or red card. They can't. Yeah, exactly. They can't hold a hand up like that. But they surround the referee in the hope that, they will pressurize him into brandishing a yellow card or a red card. And I don't like that. I think the spirit amongst the professionals now has sunk. Yeah. I think it's sunk. And I think it's horrible to see. And I honestly believe, and I've tweeted about it a couple of times, that even the PFA in England should do something about it because it's their members. It's their members. And they should be looking to try and clean that whole act up. And it's something that I just think, drags the game down. But as for VAR, I think it is here to stay. I was losing faith in it a while ago, but I think some of the judgments now are better. They're judging it on its merits and not necessarily purely by the law. And I think sometimes it's the law that's the problem. It's the interpretation of the law that just gets a little muddled, and then the subjectivity kicks in. But some of the laws haven't been too clever either.
Jim, moving on to the Premier League title race, we are in January and there's still quite a few teams that are actually in the title race. Man City are starting to slowly climb the table and get that consistency that they lacked earlier in the season. Liverpool have started well, but have started now, but they are getting players back again. Thiago's, just returned from injury, and one or two others are on the way. And then also Man United are finding a way of winning, even when they perhaps haven't played well. And Spurs with Mourinho, they're still also in the background and making their way towards that top 3, top 4 spot. So who do you see as the favourites for the title this season?
That's a question I didn't want you to ask, Wasim. Thank you very much for that, because that is the toughest question you've thrown at me, without a shadow of a doubt. I felt from the start of the season that it would be Liverpool or Manchester City. not knowing that Liverpool were going to suffer what they have in terms of injuries. But I remember being very impressed with the likes of Tottenham, Leicester, early on in the season. Southampton were good. Aston Villa made quite a good start and have a couple of games in hand on some teams still. But in realistic terms, to actually maintain a title run, I would think it's probably going to come down to Liverpool, Manchester United and Manchester City. I think ultimately it will be those three again. I think Liverpool are capable of grinding. Yeah, they've not had a better spell, but if they can just get the centre of their defence solidified in terms of maybe Matip's fitness and Fabinho, whether they get a player in or not, a centre back in or not, we'll have to wait and see. Klopp is saying no, they won't until the summer. But if they can get that strength in the heart of the defence, then I can see a challenge being maintained, certainly. Manchester United, quite incredible, really, isn't it? Because I remember doing the Leipzig game. I'm not trying to wind you up here, Riaz. And I mean, as a United fan, you couldn't have been more disappointed the way that began that night. That was nobody. I didn't see that coming. And they almost rescued it, but that was a low point. That was a big blow to Manchester United at that stage, because it looked as if they had done all the hard work earlier in the group. And then, of course, on the weekend it was the Man City game in the derby, and 0-0. Nobody's too upset with that. And there was a nervousness around Old Trafford. I can remember kind of feeling that. I always talk to the staff, the ex-players, some of the ambassadors at the club, like Dennis Irwin, Brian Robson, Gary Pallister. And people were a little uneasy at the time. And then they win at Sheffield United, and it's all of a sudden the narrative had changed from from nothing to all of a sudden title contenders. Manchester United are in with a shout. And I mean, I think the week before, not that you should ever believe too much on social media, but All Out was trending again. So it's like ridiculous. But I think when you do look back on everything, I think Manchester United have had a very steady rebuild. I mean, the second half of last season was exceptional. Once Bruno Fernandes arrived, he seemed to just spark the whole club, and I think Manchester United have, and people will disagree with me on this, but I think they have all the tools for it now. They have the backup, they have the squad, and I like what they do. I think defensively they can put another run together in looking quite stout. And they have the firepower. They have the firepower for fun. It's just a case now whether he can get the best out of the likes of Pogba. If he can get more out of Paul Pogba, then that could be another trigger for Manchester United to go on. So, and then you look at Manchester City, and as you said, Wasim, they're pulling it all together again now. Look, they didn't have a pre-season like Manchester United. It was a slow start. They were denied several players, and now they've had one or two problems with COVID, but they're getting their main men back bit by bit, and of course they're going to play a big part in it. I mean, again, I don't want to remind you of it, Riaz, but the performance at Old Trafford the other night, Manchester United were good, but Manchester City were kind of at another level again. So that was the best I've seen them play this season for Manchester City, and I've covered a few of their games. So of course they're going to be a force in time to come. So for me, I'm going to go with those three and nobody else.
Yeah, I can remember going to bed quite disappointed the other night after the Carabao Cup loss, because I think Sahil and myself, I mentioned the word outclassed because I thought City were in total control in that game, and defensively, Ruben Dias and John Stone seems to have revived his career in this last 6 to 8 weeks. they were formidable at the back, and they're looking formidable at the back. And with Kevin De Bruyne pulling the strings in midfield, if Stones and Diaz continue their form, keeping Aymeric Laporte out to the side, it's going to be a daunting task for anyone coming up against him. And yeah, I was disappointed. I think for me personally, Jim, I feel that when Bruno doesn't perform, nobody else picks up the slack to pull United over the line. I think that's the biggest issue with us. Consistency is a big issue. As much as I'd like to throw out the phrase title contenders out there, I see us. For me, it's still going to be Liverpool and Manchester City.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can understand your thinking on that, and I said exactly the same. I think in one of the recent games I covered, I think it was the Villa game when Villa arrived at Old Trafford, that we just don't know what to expect from Manchester United. Yes, we saw in the latter half of last season, we saw a really consistent run. You know, a terrific run where they climbed the table and eventually pipped Leicester, of course, on the final day for a Champions League slot. But we don't know. We don't know whether they're going to be able to maintain that again now. And of course, the other thing is, you know, we're always desperate to know, even from the start of the season, who's going to win it or who's going to finish second, third, fourth, you know, et cetera, what three are going to go down. But it's still a very hard call because nobody knows what's coming in terms of injury, suspension. So what's happening now could be very different in 2 months' time, hugely different in 2 months' time. And remember, it's been a bit of a bonker season because, and I do sympathise, certainly with the clubs involved in European football, because I think their schedules have been extremely tough. And some of the results have been absolutely crazy. I think that could be continued, you know. I think we could be in for more upset results that nobody's expecting because I think it's that kind of season where you might meet a team, you're feeling fairly fresh, they're not feeling great on the day, and, you know, you run up a big score. I can see quite a bit of that continuing through the season. And to be honest, if the truth be told, I would love to see 3 or 4 teams in with a shout going into the last couple of weeks of the season. I would love to see that drama again. We've had the kind of the elite drama really between Manchester City and Liverpool when they came so close together. We've had Manchester City running away with it. We've had Liverpool running away with it. I think now we're due maybe, you know, a quartet of teams that can stay in the race and just keep everybody excited and every fan on the edge of his seat, or her.
So just also move on to the management aspect of the game at the moment, Jim. Let's talk a bit about the energetic, passionate German that sits in the dugout at Anfield. To what extent do you feel that Klopp has changed the club, and where does he rank among the top Liverpool managers right now in the world? Also, like you mentioned, Ole out trending on Twitter when you check. As a United fan, you know, Ole for me is just a game away from that trending. What we're finding is managers' positions are so precarious at the moment. They're just a few bad results away from talk of getting sacked. And the pressure seems to be piled on them more with social media around. I mean, we've seen Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, recently Mikel Arteta, Frank Lampard is coming under the cosh now. And they are so scrutinized at the moment. Do you ever feel we'll get back to the time of Wenger or Fergie or even Simeone right now, where a manager is in a position for a prolonged period?
Well, Sean Dyche is the perfect example at the moment. I think he's been at Burnley since 2012.
Well,
I think
yes.
I'm right in saying. So that's quite lengthy, and he has done a wonderful job. In terms of Jurgen Klopp, I liken his team to the way we played back then. I think the club statistician told me, I think last season, that the 85-86 team, which I played in, we won the double, I think scored most goals in a season. Klopp's team came close a couple of seasons ago, but they didn't quite get there. So I think the teams were very alike. We were very attack-minded. when we needed to dig in and defend, we could. And I think he's built a side that is quite similar to that. I've had a chance to, through media work, to speak to Jurgen Klopp, and I was immediately impressed. And, you know, I wasn't surprised that the club hierarchy extended his contract and then extended it again because of but I think this is before he was even winning anything, because I think they knew that, you know, they had a winner. They had somebody who keeps perspective nailed on. I mean, every time he talks about a situation or a club circumstance, he nails it. You know, so
Yes.
to have that kind of authority in your dressing room, I think makes a big mark. And what he's gotten out of his players over the last 3 seasons, I think has been tremendous. You know, they've been a wonderful sight to watch, and I'm not just saying that because I have a Liverpool connection, but they have been. You know, they've been superb, really, in all departments. And you know, he put all that together. I was pleased that he signed a contract until 2024. Equally pleased that Pep Guardiola has now signed an extension to his contract, not quite that long, but it's great to keep that rivalry within the English game, within the English Premier League.
Yes.
You know, and as for Ole, I hear what you're saying. I think because, you know, I had the same conversation when you came back from Leipzig and beat Everton on the Saturday in that 12:30 kickoff. You know, we were saying the same thing. You know, is the next game going to be it for him? Listen, social media and the hyperbole that exists around everything now, you know, a lot of it has to be ignored. Some of it can be accepted, but I mean, even Frank Lampard now is kind of supposedly the number one now in terms of the next managerial sacking. I just find that all a bit ridiculous. They've hit a 4 or 5 game lesser spell. You know, there's no reason as to why that team can't come back. I think there's just an impatience at Chelsea for it all to bed in. They seem to have cracked it for a while. From goal traders, they wanted to obviously be tighter at the back, and that seemed to be happening, you know, in the recent past. And now it's just opened up a little again. So everybody is on his case. I think to be a manager nowadays, you need a very thick skin, or you need to disassociate yourself and completely blank social media. Stay away from it, because it's toxic in terms of criticism and calling people out.
Jim, you touched on your career in media, and you know how grateful you were in actually getting into media. To many of us, you know, watching a football game when we were younger, if the commentator was not as expressive or as accurate, you know, in describing the game, it wouldn't be as exciting, you know, in watching someone or a commentator that was. You know, for myself growing up in Riaz and Wasim, I'm sure we remember the likes of Sir Trevor Brooking, Peter Brackley. You know, we had Martin Tyler, John Champion, Peter Drury, who you're very familiar with, and then my personal favorite, Clive Tilsley, who takes the experience of you know, a football game and watching a football game to a whole new level. You know, it inspires a lot of us. So, you know, just keeping with that theme, do you have anyone, you know, in the field of commentary that particularly inspired you, or when you got into media?
No, it's different, because when people were commentating during my career, I was aware of commentators, but I wasn't aspiring to be a commentator. I was never kind of thinking like that. I was thinking about having a lengthy career.
Football career. Yeah.
So I was never looking at any of the commentators. Some I admire. I mean, you've mentioned a few. I remember Clive when he worked for Radio City in Liverpool, which was, you know, his part of his process in getting into television. I remember that. I can remember Martin Tyler and meeting him when I was still trying to cling on to a career, because Martin would always be around the tunnel as you went out to warm up, things like that. So, but I mean, I would be aspiring to a co-com, really, or to maybe another pundit or something like that. I didn't really want to go down this road. I wanted to go into coaching, and that was my preference. And I had begun my at Elland Road. I had begun my coaching badges as they were known back then. It's of course coaching licenses now, and yeah, I was set on that. But I remember sitting in Howard Wilkinson's office when I was retiring. Now I had done a little bit of local radio in Leeds, and he said, "What about a career in the media?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I haven't really given that any thought. I wanted to stay within the kind of environs of football and the coaching aspect." So he kind of planted a seed in my head. And then shortly after that, I had also, meanwhile, while I was clinging onto my career, done some radio work for RTE in Ireland, because I had been in the Irish squad, and my injury obviously, kept me kind of in with the players. And so Irish radio asked me to go to Italia 90 as a co-com and a pundit. So I was very new to it, and I was very raw, and I didn't really know what I was getting into. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the whole learning process. So bit by bit, then I started getting calls. I did a couple of things for Sky Television, Granada TV in the region here in the northwest of England. They were inviting players who'd newly retired to go to a football game and report. They used to have a Saturday afternoon program and report on a game. And I can remember going to Liverpool, Nottingham Forest and doing a report. And the next thing, I found myself sitting in a studio the following Tuesday, because they felt I could string a sentence together, and it went from there. So I never wanted to be in a studio. I did lots and lots of studio work back then, but I was always drawn to co-com. First of all, I like being in the stadium. I like being amongst the atmosphere. And while there's some great analysis done in terms of punditry, I mean, I see stuff sometimes. I've just watched the game, and a pundit can just pick something out and think, "Well, I didn't see that." That's a great spot, and it's very insightful. And I like all that side of it. But I was always drawn to the co-commentary side of things, because what's happening below you is fact. Yeah. You're putting your interpretation on the fact. Yeah. I found in studios that an awful lot of the conversations were speculation. Yeah. That they might do that if he stays fit. If that's not for me, I've always liked fact from when I was a kid. I've always liked stuff like that. So that was it. I kind of made it known to one or two producers that I didn't want to be in studios, and I was told it was going to harm my career. But I stuck to my guns, and luckily I managed to kind of get through those spells, and people were telling me that I might, encounter a problem or two. Thankfully I didn't, and I've been able to plow on. And to be honest with you, I never envisaged that I'd be doing it, as long as I have been. But I love it, and I'm addicted to it, and I can't help it. Sure. And I also admit that there are times I don't like hearing my own bloody voice. Excuse my language. Because you turn on Premier League Review or whatever, and you think, "Oh God, he's on again." I know, like, I'm sure there are many fans out there that kind of feel equally like that. But there are times, and we've had an absolutely crazy spell in December, schedule-wise, and January is, hasn't eased too much either. But it's been a mad spell in December, and sometimes, you'll say something because you've done, say, 4 games in 5 days, or you're on 5 games in a row or whatever, which can happen. And you say something, and okay, people don't know, but it can kind of sit with you, and you can think, that was tired. That was a lazy effort. Or I've repeated myself. Every job is repetitive. Every job is repetitive. In commentary, you have to find a different way of saying the same thing. Yeah. So if I've said something, and then 5 minutes later, I'm not going to repeat it, because there's always somebody sitting somewhere around the world that's going to go, "Oh, you've just said that. You said that." So you find another way of saying it. And I've always tried to kind of, work from that way. But bit by bit over the years, I've managed to kind of, if I can put it this way, hone my skill. Everybody is different. Everybody has a different approach to what they do. Mine has evolved as it is. I genuinely try to do my best. I've always striven to do that. No matter what I take on, I want to do it to the best of my ability. And that's always been my thinking. And that's the same with co-coms now. I will never, ever get blasé. And I know I can talk for Peter too. I'll never, ever get blasé about the fact, I'm turning up to do Burnley Crystal Palace. Who cares? Well, I'm sorry, but there's somebody somewhere caring. And that I can't be flippant in my approach and, disregarding and disrespecting the two teams in front of me just because they're not top liners. So I treat every game the same way. I like to think I do. Yes, of course, there are games that come along that are more important, that are bigger affairs. There's one actually just about to arrive on the 17th of January. But I do. I try to take every game seriously and do it respectfully and properly.
Awesome. Last quick question from my side. Obviously, like we've mentioned, Clive Tilsley, and from what I remember, calling the 1999 Champions League final and screaming, that Solskjaer has won it. Those kind of moments, really stuck with me, when watching the game. For you, what is your greatest moment that you've ever witnessed whilst commentating in a game?
I was there. I was at the New Camp in '99, working for Irish television.
Nice.
And that was an incredible moment. That was an incredible moment. I can remember Clive when they equalised because I watched it when I got home, and he said that when they got that equaliser, name on the trophy.
The trophy.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't need a whole lot of words to sum up a situation properly. And he basically nailed it by saying that name on the trophy, and it happened because Fergie time was in existence then, and Manchester United got a lot of late goals. Excuse me, I'm just going to turn the light on in here because it's getting very dark.
No problem.
Sure.
Okay, just moving about in my seat. But in terms of big moments, God, I've been fortunate enough to see many over the years, but I always go back, and I can't deny this. And again, it's not bias. It's going to sound like it, but I have to go back to Istanbul in 2005. I can't ignore that because I wrote Liverpool off that night at halftime. My last comment before halftime was men against boys, and this could get embarrassing. It was on the threshold of embarrassment. And Liverpool fans, you've heard all the stories, were leaving the stadium. And of course, what transpired there was quite incredible. The goal back and then
the penalty.
The penalty, and it was ridiculous. And then the two saves by Dudek from Shevchenko. When you think, he has to score. But I worked with a guy, and I still do, although the pandemic stops me working for Irish TV at the moment, a guy called George Hamilton. And when we had a kind of our own narrative about Liverpool and that whole run to the final. And we were kind of putting it out there that they're going to do this. I don't know. There was a hunch. Just felt that it's, and as soon as Dudek made that save, and I can remember looking at him as if to say, he kind of went, this is it. This is Liverpool's night. It's going to happen. And he went kind of big on it. And I'm looking going, are you sure? You're committing yourself still a little early. Milan can still, go and win this. But it all turned out, obviously, in the form of penalties. And that was crazy. I mean, we stayed up drinking all through the night. Because it was 2 hours ahead in Istanbul, and got an early flight back home, went and played some golf, and carried on drinking.
Jim, on a personal level, as South Africans, you've seen great players like Benny McCarthy, Sean Bartlett, Quinton Fortune, Stephen Pienaar grace the Premier League. we've now seen Percy Tau being recalled from Brighton. Because of all the following in South Africa, have you seen much of him? And are you looking forward to seeing him in the Premier League?
I am looking forward to seeing him. I always look forward to seeing new talents and what they're all about, what they can give. And I also like the whole kind of process in how they'll cope. Have they got the coping mechanisms? Because when you come into this league that you're going to suffer downs. It's not all joy and wonder. It's hard graft and the blood, sweat and tears that's referred to so often. So I always like to kind of gauge the character that some of these players have. I haven't had the fortune to experience Percy Tau as yet. I'm very much aware of the name. I think one or two have mentioned him to me on social media at times, but I have seen some footage of him training with Brighton again, and I wish him well. They've been some kind of wonderful players from the African continent, and of course South Africa too. I mean, did you mention Lucas Radebe in amongst all of that? See, there you go. He was. He's a great example of success in the Premier League. I think anybody that kind of wants to aspire to that level, then just look at how he went about his business. So always I don't know. I have a thing now for we go around the world, but Africa for me just kind of jumps out a bit more than anywhere else because I'm not just saying that to try and butter you guys up. I mean, I went on a little Twitter tour of Africa during the first lockdown because, I love the response you get from Africa. You get, there's a kind of a cynicism in Europe. Whatever you do, that's not good enough, or, they'll blame you for this, that. There's a lovely kind of freshness about people's views from Africa. Yeah, of course, you get one or two that can get a little tasty, but there's an enthusiasm. There's an enthusiasm about the African continent for the Premier League like nowhere else in the world. I firmly believe that. So I've always had that attachment, and I always kind of when we're working on a game, maybe I don't put African players up there in terms of what I'm going to refer to him or I'm going to refer to him. I don't do that, but I'm aware of them. I'm always aware of them. Yeah. And we've got some brilliant players from the African continent in the Premier League at the moment.
Totally agree. Jim, just to end off on our side, we've got quick quiz questions. It's basically short answers you can give us. So I've got about 5 of them. So you can just kind of give us based on your gut feeling. So I'm going to go ahead with the first question: Messi or Ronaldo?
Messi.
Okay, good.
We're all Messi fans in this group, so I think you've definitely won us over even more. But to the next one: Guardiola or Klopp?
I would have to say. I was gonna go. I have to say Klopp.
Yeah.
Klopp's always been nicer to me. We were up at Huddersfield a couple of seasons ago when they were in the Premier League, Peter Drury and I, and we were sitting on the Manchester City bench, very luxurious bench, I may say. And Pep came out because he has a pre-game routine and he always sits outside. Maybe not this weather, but he sits outside. And he kind of rudely told us to get off his seat. we were on his seat. We were messing about, just trying to pretend we were coaching, going, and yeah, he kicked us out.
The next question: the greatest club side that you've ever seen?
Barcelona. Yeah. Under Pep. So yeah.
And then the best player you've ever played with and against?
The best player I ever played with was Kenny Dalglish. Oh. The best player I ever played against, even though I played with him. But I played against him in international football, was Ian Rush. Because, and I'll tell you why, because the first line of defence, Ian Rush, was always incredible. But my appreciation for how good he was at it was only realised when I played against him, Ireland-Wales. And, he'd make you think you could receive the ball in plenty of time from the keeper. And by the time it arrived at your feet, you had nowhere to go because he was on top of you. And he was an incredible he was an incredible goal scorer, but also an incredible worker.
You've named 2 ex-Newcastle players or managers, so I am quite happy with your answer. The next question, your best player that you would rate in terms of the Premier League at the moment?
Premier League at the moment. Wow, there's a lot. I like Grealish. I've got an attachment to Jack Grealish because I like what he does, and I know there's the biggest clubs are kind of supposed to be still sniffing about. But yeah, I like him. The thing I don't like about him at times is that he doesn't try to stay on his feet. I don't mind saying that. Yeah. But in terms of everything else about his game, yeah, I do like Jack Grealish.
Thanks so much. I think that's basically covered our quiz questions.
Yeah. And Bruno Fernandes, by the way. And lots of others.
Yeah, I was actually expecting you to say Kevin De Bruyne there, Jim.
Well, yeah. Well, I think he's been doing it for a while now. Grealish for me is really coming on in his career now, and he's got the England call up. I mean, De Bruyne is almost a given. De Bruyne is genius. I love watching him. I mean, every manager in the Premier League will want to have De Bruyne in his side, and every manager would like Bruno Fernandes too. But in terms of a guy who's kind of really beginning to impact, he probably faded, Jack Grealish, in the latter part of last season. As Villa struggled to stay up, but he looks as if he's kind of set on remaining strong all the way through this one. I like what I see.
Well, Jim, we definitely want to thank you for all of your time you've given us today. Before we do give you the official thank you, though, guys, if you are watching, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a follow on Twitter as well as Instagram. Mr. Beglin, we've always dreamt about having you on our channel and getting to speak to you, and today you've made it happen. So we know that you guys are inundated. You've got incredibly hectic work schedules. So we thank you so much for giving us of your time to come on our channel. We thoroughly enjoyed it. We hope to have it a lot shorter, but we enjoyed chatting to you so much. And from all of us here at ATF, many, many thanks. And we definitely look forward to hearing your commentary as well as your partner, Peter Drury, week in, week out.
Yeah, listen, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it. The questioning wasn't too tough. And I don't know when I'm going to hook up with Peter again. But it could be for the Liverpool-Manchester United game, and that'll be quite nice if so. Thank you.